You know, we even for discrete variables, we do this. But essentially, this is the measure of central density that we have talked about apply to data sets where the numbers have real quantitative meaning. But sometimes we get into situations where we have to deal with data that is nominal data. When it comes to nominal data, the measures of central tendency that we have talked about sometimes make no meaning. And what makes a lot of meaning in those situations is to have frequency tables. And a frequency table essentially is just a table where you have, you know, a list of the categories, and you have how many people belong to each category. And when you look at your table, when you look at your manuscripts, you're going to find a lot of frequency tables in your manuscripts, because frequency tables are useful whether your data is nominal, is ordered. Frequency tables can help, can be useful in summarizing your data in either of those situations. Are we sharing this? Is the screen being shared?
There's a frequency table that's being shared. You can see it.
Okay, I know I can see it. I just see people commenting about the need the screen to be shared. I think we can move. So in this frequency table that we have on the screen right now, can we go back to the last slide? So in this frequency table, for instance, no, the last slide,
Okay.
the one to the left, you know, kind of shows you how many people in this data set belong to each of the age categories. So this is categorical data, and you see each person, you see what percentage or what number of people belong to each of the age categories. To the right, you see some nominal categories, female and male, and how many people in the data set belong to each of the nominal categories. Hey, move on now, move on.
Okay.
Now, sometimes the problem we have when you're thinking about sharing, when you're thinking about discrete and nominal, discrete data that contains discrete and nominal variables, is that you have more than one variable that's of interest. For instance, you're trying to think about sex in relation to age categories. So in that situation, we have what we would call relative frequencies. And these two tables you have on the table, you are far more likely to find relative frequency tables in your manuscripts than any other kind of table. And these two tables that you find out here are examples of, on this slide, are examples of, relative frequency tables. So in the table on the left, you have age categories. Then you have female and male. For each of the row, what you have is a breakdown of everybody who belongs to the 25 to 29 year band. A breakdown of those people into female and male. So the way you read this table, for instance, is that in this study, there are 31 people who are between 25 to 29 year old, and 18 of them are female, 13 of them are male. So the total for that age group is 100%. It's 31 people. That makes 100% of that age group. So you see that 100% in the total helps you understand that the breakdown by male and female refers to everybody that belongs to the 25 to 29 year category. So if you go down that table, you see that for each of the categories, you see the number of people in each of the categories and the total number of people in that age category. Now you can contrast that with the table on the other side, where what you see here is that when you look at the female column, so look at the first row, for instance, it's still the same 18 people, 18 females that are in the 25 to 29 category, age category, and there are 13 males in the 25 to 29 category. But when you look at the percentage that's written here, that's 18 as a percentage of all the females in the study. So you go down for each of the categories, you see the amount of females in each age category. And at the end of the, just in the lowest row, you see the total and you see 100%. So seeing 100%, in the lowest row vertically, it tells you that the breakdown is within this column. Same thing for the males. So what this tells you is that relative frequency tables can be designed in a variety of ways. And when you read through relative frequency tables, you have to be careful to see what does each of the percentages mean. Otherwise, it is very easy to misinterpret what figure you are looking at and what percentage you are looking at if you do not understand whether, for instance, if you do not understand whether the percentages here are referring to within sex categories or within age categories, you can draw the wrong inference. So can we go to the next slide? I think we can. So essentially, this is let's go back a bit. So this table is an example of the relative frequency table, and like I said earlier, you're going to find so many of these kind of tables. This is it's hard to find a manuscript where you won't find a relative frequency table. So you need to learn, how to look at your table and see what adds up to what. So in this table, just by looking at where you have 100% in the totals, you can tell that what's happening here is that for each row, the total, what you see as the total is the total for the category represented by each row. So for 25 to 29-year-olds, among pregnant,
I see errors in the what's it called? In the table. It looks like that should be female and male. That's essentially the same table that we're looking at. And this is not mean hemoglobin. This is just the same table that we just looked at, just presented in one format. We can skip this and keep going. So we'll correct it before we send out the final version.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's actually, okay. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next slide. So now that we understand what kinds, what variables mean and the kinds of variables that we have, and we understand what ratio measures are and the different kinds of ratio measures, proportions, rates, and we know how do we summarize, nominal and discrete variables. The last part of this conversation would be graphical display.